By mid-morning on May 29th, 2014, Leah's small hatchback was parked between two pickup trucks at Katahdin Stream Trailhead, plate number verified on Ranger log. Inside, a half-drunk coffee, phone charging cable, and a folded itinerary email printed for her sister Ellen. A time-stamped gas receipt from Millinocket records her purchase at 6:15 a.m. One energy bar, 1 gallon of water paid in cash. Sensory anchors persisted long after her presence. Crunch of gravel under boots, cedar scent, the hum of insects along the tree line, the mundane rhythms of a wilderness morning that would later be scrutinized, frame by frame. Interviewed later, volunteer searcher James Noyes recalled, "It felt still, like she just stepped off the edge of something without knowing it. The routine detail, the signed register, becomes the first of many anchors in a case that would resist resolution for years. In evidence summaries, investigators label it Exhibit 1, Initial Intent. Every disappearance begins with paperwork, with ordinary documentation that transforms into something else entirely. In the ranger's rotational log, her checkout column remains blank, a small omission that would later carry the weight of absence. 2 weeks earlier, Leah's online purchase history shows trail maps, a new GPS unit, and a personal locator beacon she never activated. Records from her phone reveal downloaded segments of the Appalachian Trail documentary Northbound Paths, paused at minute 47, a sequence showing safety protocols for solo hikers. Her life appeared ordered. Counselor, volunteer, disciplined hiker, co-workers described her as cautious, method-driven. She plans even silence, one colleague said during later interviews. Every trail she hiked was researched, every route calculated. The footage transitions to her apartment, neat labeled gear bags stacked by the door. Beneath clinical lighting, investigators catalog them: boots, compass, unopened first aid pack. The ordinary completeness of preparedness deepens the procedural unease. This wasn't recklessness. This was someone who understood wilderness protocols. Case analysts noted a peculiar contradiction. Her hiking journal included detailed notes on emergency procedures, yet the personal locator beacon remained in its original packaging. A choice that would later raise questions about her final moments on the trail. In over 1,600 recorded missing hiker cases across national parklands since 2000, less than 10% remain unsolved. Leah Price would become part of that minority, cases where preparation meets some unseen variable that changes everything. Her unactivated beacon, later recovered among her possessions at home, still held full battery charge. A small detail that investigators would circle back to repeatedly in the months ahead. By early afternoon on that May day, hikers descending the Hunt Trail recalled seeing a woman in a teal jacket pass near the tree line above Thoreau Spring. None could recall the moment she veered away or any indication of distress. The weather shifted. Temperature dropped, barometer falling, common for late spring in Maine's highest peaks. 4 hours later, a storm moved in from the West Ridge. According to the incident report logged at 2,200 hours, no signal pinged from her phone after 15:30. Cell tower records would later confirm this silence. The sensory landscape changed with the approaching front. Wind over stone, distant thunder, static in ranger radios as teams began routine end-of-day checks. It was during these standard communications that the first questions about Leah emerged. The first discrepancy appears not in sighting but timing. GPS traces from another hiker's device show an unexplained pause near grid reference 247 north 18 degrees. When overlaid with the topographical map, This location corresponds to neither a scenic viewpoint nor a rest area. It simply marks a patch of wilderness like any other. Investigators later mark that as Anomaly 1, the first hint that something beyond routine had occurred on the trail. Computer analysis of movement patterns from other hikers that day showed no similar pauses in that location. Family contacts were not alerted until midnight, standard protocol for adult hikers who might simply be delayed by weather or trail conditions. But as darkness settled over Katahdin, the timestamp gap, 94 minutes unaccounted for, would become the investigation's spine. A period of time that disappeared with Leah herself. Ellen Price phoned Baxter Dispatch at 6:20 a.m. on May 30th after Leah failed to return texts and had not checked into the campground as planned. The official missing person protocol initiated at 8, a routine response that would soon escalate beyond standard parameters. Ranger Captain Dwyer's statement reads, "Standard first 36 hours, presumed lost, due to weather, experienced subject." His voice on recorded briefings remained measured, clinical. Wilderness search operations begin with the assumption of survival, of disorientation rather than disaster. At family request, state police joined by day's end. Gear inventory matched planned solo day hike. No indicators of intent to stray. Rain and fog reduced visibility below 50 meters, complicating the initial search pattern. Audio logs capture clipped radio codes that would become familiar to the Price family waiting in the ranger station. Search Sector Bravo, 0 result. Team Charlie moving to coordinate Marker 9. Visibility decreasing, request permission to hold position. The sensory landscape of the search embedded itself in everyone involved. Helicopter rotor wash vibrating through tree canopy, wet ferns against pant legs as teams pushed through undergrowth, metallic scent of rain on granite faces that seemed to absorb sound itself. In subsequent analysis, investigators noted no boot prints beyond 300 meters from junction marker 12, a finding at odds with reported sightings along upper trail sections. The contradiction would not be resolved for years. Emotionally, the case remained procedural during these early hours, hope measured in shifts, in search patterns, in the methodical elimination of possibilities. For the Price family, each passing hour transformed waiting into a kind of testimony. Ellen would later tell investigators, "We thought silence was the worst part. We were wrong." A damp map sleeve found folded, initials intact, along a dry log facing east, became the first physical evidence recovered. Its position, protected from rainfall, suggested deliberate placement rather than accidental loss. The small artifact pointed eastward, away from the primary trail system. Every disappearance starts with data, time, location, signature. It's only later that data becomes memory, that coordinates transform into absence. For the Price family, the transition had begun. By May 31st, 2014, over 50 personnel, including Maine Warden Service, Air National Guard helicopter crews, and 36 volunteers, established coordinated grids. Leah's last known position defined base coordinates for what would become an operation of unprecedented scale for the region. Search record entry. Sector D completed 1,800 hours, visibility 9 meters, negative findings. The clinical language of search operations filled page after page, each entry marking another segment of wilderness investigated and cleared. The rhythm of footfalls and radio beeps replaced narrative. Every sound became data. Every movement translated into coordinate shifts. The forest itself seemed to absorb both sound and hope as the hours accumulated. Family members waited inside the Millinocket staging tent, reviewing topographic overlays prepared by SAR analyst Denise Ramos, Ellen Price traced the contour lines with her finger, memorizing elevations and drainages, as if understanding the terrain might somehow reveal her sister's location. The national average for locating lost hikers within 72 hours stands near 86%. Beyond that window, recovery classifications shift to extended search phase, a bureaucratic term that masks the emotional weight it carries. The Price family crossed this threshold in silence, watching the operational maps transition from immediate to expanded search zones. Sensory anchors of these critical hours remained vivid in later interviews. Rotor echo fading into tree line as light failed, paper maps creased by rain and desperate handling, flashlight beams cutting evening mist during night operations that yielded nothing but exhaustion. A Sector D camera trap, retrieved during equipment rotation, captured one blurred frame. Motion detected at 19:07 hours. The image showed nothing conclusive, just a shadow moving between trees, possibly human, possibly animal. But it became the first tenuous hope that Leah remained within the search perimeter. 3 days into operations, K9 units signaled faint scent near the old logging road west of Katadine Stream. Hope surged within the command tent, visible in the sudden straightening of shoulders, the quick exchange of glances. The footage cuts to handlers tightening leashes, mud splattering across uniforms as they pushed deeper into terrain marked by spring runoff and dense undergrowth. By afternoon, rain erased the trace. Subsequent analysis of soil showed no identifiable DNA, no fabric transfers, nothing to confirm human presence beyond the dog's initial alert. The lead dissolved like so many others, promising for a moment, then gone. Family interviews record Ellen's voice steady but frayed. Every radio silence felt like being erased with her, like she was disappearing all over again with each negative report. Her words capture what statistics cannot, the accumulated weight of absence. Radiological topography scanning was requested from federal resources, but weather grounded aircraft for the third consecutive day. The technology that might have detected heat signatures or material anomalies remained unavailable precisely when most needed. Search fatigue registered in operational logs by the fourth day. Entry rotation increased, fresh teams cycling in while others rested. But the psychological toll could not be managed so efficiently. Captain Dwyer issued procedural note: scale down secondary zones. Concentrate resources on primary coordinate sectors aligned with last confirmed sighting. The sensory landscape of waiting etched itself into memory, water dripping from tent edge in rhythmic reminder of passing time, muffled dispatch voices discussing weather patterns and terrain challenges, folded photographs handled by damp fingers as family members shared Leah's image with incoming search personnel. A recovered scrap of teal fabric logged as possible jacket fragment A briefly rekindled urgency late on the fourth day. Testing later proved inconclusive. The material matched the composition of Leah's documented outerwear but bore no specific identifiers. Like so much in the case, it suggested but did not confirm, pointed but did not resolve. By June 4th, the official search entered consolidation phase. Volunteers were dismissed with formal acknowledgement. Park remained partially closed to public access. The operational tempo shifted from urgent to methodical, from recovery to documentation. Ranger memo: perimeter sweeps complete, no viable tracks beyond coordinate marker 247. The significance of this particular coordinate would not become clear until years later. At the time, it represented just another data point in a search that had begun to feel like an exercise in mapping absence, A map shown under fluorescent light in the command center repeatedly highlighted this coordinate across multiple search iterations. Leah's sister pressed fingerprints over that ink point during later interviews. That's where she stopped existing, not where she was last seen, where she actually vanished from the record. Detectives began background analysis as the wilderness search scaled back. Bank withdrawals, phone data, social patterns. Nothing irregular emerged. Leah Price appeared to have walked into the forest as herself and simply not walked out again. The normalcy of her life before disappearance deepened rather than resolved the mystery. The trail, once filled with boots and rotor noise, quieted again. Only the echo of operational cadence remained in the incident reports that continued to accumulate. Each one documented not what was found, but what wasn't. Absence acquired its own geography. As evening fell on the seventh day, the sensory landscape transformed again. Empty campsite tarps flapping in light wind, static hiss from radios as teams reported final positions, dusk light filtering through spruce needles onto equipment being packed away. The search was transitioning to something else, something longer, less urgent, more archival. On June 6th, a hiker's GoPro footage surfaced, showing, faintly, an unrecognized campsite beyond closed zone boundaries. The finding prompted a brief expansion of search operations, but investigation revealed only a site abandoned months earlier, unrelated to Leah's case. The lead, like others before it, collapsed under scrutiny. Resources dwindled as June continued. Maine State Police maintained skeleton crews rotating through primary search areas, but the operation had fundamentally changed. Captain Dwyer's briefing on June 10th acknowledged the transition. We're now in recovery assessment. Our operational objective is identification of remains or significant personal effects. For the Price family, this clinical language marked a psychological threshold. Ellen requested permission to join survey teams, unusual but not unprecedented in extended search operations. Body camera footage shows her examining trail markers with methodical care, as if each metal blaze might hold some message from her sister. "We're looking for the wrong thing," she told a volunteer coordinator during a rest break. Leah wouldn't just wander off trail, she'd leave something deliberate if she could. This perspective, born of familial knowledge, introduced a new search parameter, the possibility of intentional markers rather than accidental traces. Maine wilderness statistics provide grim context. Of hikers missing longer than 9 days, 82% are recovered deceased. 15% remain missing permanently. Only 3% survive beyond the 10-day threshold. The Price family entered this statistical territory with full awareness of what the numbers suggested. The sensory landscape of extended search carries its own signature. The metallic taste of energy drinks, consumed during long shifts. The particular silence of communication devices when batteries fail, the way afternoon light catches spider webs stretched across trails not recently traveled. These details embedded themselves in the memories of those who continued searching. On June 15th, a partial boot print preserved in dried mud near the eastern drainage matched the tread pattern of Leah's documented footwear. Plaster casts confirmed size and wear pattern alignment. Its location, however, contradicted previous search vectors, placing her movement eastward rather than continuing north along the planned route. Search coordinates shifted accordingly, but the new sectors yielded nothing. The boot print remained isolated, contextless, a single point in space without connection to any larger pattern. Like the fabric fragment, it confirmed Leah's presence without explaining her absence. By June 18th, operational resources concentrated on documentation rather than active searching. The case file grew while the physical search contracted. Ellen Price returned to Virginia, carrying with her the ranger's assurance that any new evidence would prompt immediate notification and renewed effort. Searches end with paper, files sealed, coordinates archived. Loss becomes a logistic outcome. But for those who knew Leah Price, the paper trail represented something else entirely: the transformation of a person into a case, of presence into procedure. 5 years later, on September 12th, 2019, a documentary crew filming park recovery footage near the same sector found a makeshift structure camouflaged in birch branches. The discovery occurred during routine B-roll filming, the camera operator noticing unusual branch patterns while capturing transitional scenery. Inside the crude shelter, rusted camp stove, nylon rope, fragments of synthetic fabric consistent with teal jacket fragment A recovered during the original search. The documentary team immediately ceased filming and contacted park authorities. GPS reading on file, grid 24/7, identical coordinate last, marked in SR Phase 1 5 years earlier. The numerical alignment struck investigators as both significant and disturbing. This location had been searched repeatedly during the initial operation, yet somehow the structure remained undetected. Footage reveals human modification, a trapdoor cleverly disguised beneath natural rock formation, leading beneath a rock shelf into what appeared to be a prepared space. State authorities reactivated case BXP 14117 within hours of the initial report. Forensic entry notes presence of degraded personal items, wallet containing Leah Price's driver's license, partially preserved journal pages bearing handwriting patterns confirmed by FBI lab analysis to match exemplars provided by family in 2014. The sensory landscape of discovery carried its own disturbing signature: flies buzzing over collapsed tarp material, echo of shovel-striking metal objects. During initial excavation, distant thunder rolling across Forest Basin as storm systems approached the search zone once again. DNA analysis from hair samples recovered from inside the structure confirmed through mitochondrial sequencing that Leah Price had been alive approximately until mid-late 2015, more than a year after her disappearance. The finding transformed what had been a missing person case into something far more complex and disturbing. Excavation teams under Maine State Police processed the subterranean chamber, measuring 10 by 6 feet with a crude fire pit vented through natural rock fissures, and a metal grate ceiling camouflaged with forest detritus. The space showed evidence of prolonged human habitation. Material analysis identified traces of sedative compounds on cooking implements, water filters reused beyond safety parameters, and medication containers with labels removed. Forensic technicians cataloged 117 separate items, each suggesting a narrative of captivity rather than wilderness survival. Fingerprint comparison produced partial match to transient drifter Patrick Keller, previously cited for trespassing in Baxter Region in 2013. Records showed multiple wilderness violations but no violent criminal history until now. His fingerprints appeared throughout the structure, on food containers, and most significantly on restraint devices recovered from the chamber's far wall. Case classification shifted immediately from missing person search to felony abduction to homicide variant investigation. The procedural language changed, but the core question remained unanswered. What happened to Leah Price? Interagency meeting? Transcript excerpt captured the tonal shift. Transition jurisdiction to major crimes unit. Secure perimeter, daylight entry only. Maintain media exclusion zone at 500 meters. The sensory landscape of evidence processing created its own disturbing rhythm: generator hum powering forensic lighting, flashbulbs reflecting from moist rock surfaces, latex gloves over trembling hands as technicians recovered items too personal to be named in initial reports. Discovery film captures investigators unfolding a weathered trail map recovered from beneath the sleeping platform, Leah's name still visible in the corner, now a timestamp of when her hike transformed into captivity. The map showed markings inconsistent with standard trail navigation, a system of notation that analysts would later attribute to her captor rather than to Leah herself. Within 20 meters of the main structure, search teams located buried food canisters labeled Subject L, allocate per meal day 8, and similar notations. The systematic nature of these findings suggested not impulsive violence, but calculated long-term intent, a predator who had prepared carefully and with specific purpose. On October 3rd, 2019, state troopers located Patrick Keller wandering near Greenville Service Road, emaciated but coherent. His appearance matched witness descriptions from sightings near Baxter State Park in 2013 and 2014. Medical evaluation indicated long-term psychosis, malnutrition, and self-inflicted scarring patterned after map coordinates, including the now significant 247 that had appeared repeatedly in Leah Price's case. In custody, he muttered repetitions captured on booking room video. She stayed quiet. We stayed quiet. His statements fractured between lucidity and delusion, but certain elements remained consistent, including descriptions of the chamber's construction that matched forensic documentation. His statements, though disjointed, contained parts verifiable by artifact location logs. He correctly identified personal items belonging to Leah that had not been publicly disclosed, including the specific location of a hair clip found wedged between rock crevices. Investigators theorized based on recovered evidence and limited testimony that Leah remained captive for months before probable death in early 2015 from exposure or refusal to eat. Medical examiners noted signs of starvation evident in hair samples recovered from the site, suggesting her final weeks involved resistance through hunger. Cases of extended captivity within remote wilderness zones remain under 1% of recorded abduction events nationwide, a statistical rarity that had complicated the initial search parameters. No one had been looking for a prisoner. They had been looking for a lost hiker. The sensory landscape of interrogation created stark contrast with the wilderness where Leah had been held. Buzzing fluorescent lights of clinical interview rooms, pen tapping plastic desk as investigators documented responses, muffled cough of attending agent during prolonged silence. The forest had been replaced by institutional space, but the questions remained environmental. How had this happened in plain sight? In the final recorded interview before psychiatric remand, Keller identified one object with unusual clarity as her map. That same map had been cataloged as Exhibit 1 in 2014, the very item that had established Leah's intended route on the day she disappeared. The realization that her captor had taken not only Leah but the documentation of her intended movements added procedural horror to personal tragedy. December 17th, 2020, federal indictment filed, United States versus Patrick Keller. Charges included unlawful restraint, criminal homicide, desecration of remains. The clinical language of the court documents transformed Leah Price from missing person to victim, her absence from mystery to crime. Court documents note mental non-competence evaluation, resulting in transfer to federal forensic psychiatric facility rather than standard incarceration. The finding prevented conventional trial proceedings but allowed for indefinite confinement under medical supervision. Prosecution presented timeline reconstructed from Leah's recovered notes, ration tallies, notations of days, fragment phrases including keep count to stay human, and window faces east, sun track helps time. Each entry was cross-referenced with diet logs from recovered canisters, creating a documentary record of captivity that served as testimony Leah herself could no longer provide. The sensory landscape of legal proceedings created its own rhythm. Shuffle of papers in courtroom, clock ticking overhead during extended silence, air conditioning hum across sterile chambers where Leah's life was reduced to evidence. The outcome, indefinite psychiatric confinement, satisfied legal requirements without providing emotional resolution. Ellen Price declined further media comments after sentencing, stating only, "It wasn't survival or death. It was waiting. For Leah, for us, for everyone involved, we're still waiting." Courtroom exhibit board displayed Leah's handwriting enlarged on projection screens, date sequence ending abruptly between day 62 and day 63. The gap represented not just missing documentation, but the moment when record keeping ended, when Leah Price, having maintained this final thread of self-documentation, could no longer continue the practice. Following judicial closure, Baxter authorities reviewed failure points, delayed response threshold, incomplete wilderness surveillance coverage, reliance on volunteer sectors without standardized training. The case transformed not just one family, but institutional practice itself. Internal memos circulated among park management. Implement continuous trailhead visual registry by year 2021. Establish mandatory check-in protocols for solo hikers. The policies that might have saved Leah Price arrived too late for her, but perhaps not for others. Rangers replaced the old wooden logbook with digital kiosk units that photographed hikers and transmitted real-time data to central monitoring stations. At installation footage, maintenance crew pauses at the exact bench where Leah once signed her name. A moment of recognition not included in official documentation. Nationwide, park systems initiated pilot coordination hubs integrating missing person cross-database alerts within 30 minutes of missed sign-outs. The Price case became part of training material for wilderness first responders, a case study in predatory behavior disguised as outdoor recreation. The sensory landscape of institutional memory created its own persistence. Hum of solar generator powering new monitoring stations, stapled notices fluttering on bulletin boards, warning solo hikers to travel in pairs, drone camera rising above forest canopy during routine surveillance that did not exist when Leah disappeared. The new interface displays her name as first archived digital entry, preserved as training simulation sample for new rangers. Her disappearance became not just a tragedy, but a lesson, her name, a code word for procedural vigilance. In this way, absence acquired presence through protocol. 5 years after rediscovery, Leah's memorial sits quietly near trail marker 12, a bronze plate inscribed with phrase, "Still counted." The location marks not where she was found, but where she was last seen moving freely through the wilderness she had come to experience. Footage from late autumn 2024 shows hikers signing the newer electronic register without noticing the original weathered page preserved beneath plexiglass, her handwriting faint but intact. The juxtaposition captures how tragedy becomes institutional memory, how individual loss transforms into procedural protection. Ellen Price established a foundation funding wilderness safety technology for small parks and trail systems. Their annual report notes, "What happened to Leah emerged from a gap between assumed safety and actual vulnerability. We work to close that gap." The sensory landscape of remembrance carries its own quality: whisper of wind through dry birch leaves, distant call of raven, sunlight diffused through morning frost on memorial plaque. These elements continue regardless of human presence or absence, the indifference of wilderness that both attracts and endangers. Narrator concludes with clinical precision. Disappearance provides data, but data cannot reconcile silence. Cases like this remain archived, periodically reopened, perpetually incomplete. Camera lingers on the logbook, the ink entry now displayed behind reflection of passers-by who sign their own names without knowing they're participating in ritual remembrance. The final frame fades over radio static from archived search logs. Signal lost at grid reference 247. Procedure ends. Terrain remains. The trail never changes, only those who vanish upon it. The camera returns to the Katahdin Stream trailhead. Morning light again, ordinary hikers checking GPS units, signing names. Everything appears as it did that May morning, years earlier. The same trees, the same stone steps leading toward the hunt trail. In the quiet detail of one electronic register, the system auto-completes LEAH as a visitor begins to sign in. A cursor blinks, waiting for confirmation or correction. Then the screen refreshes. No sign-out recorded.